Hey everyone, Eric Watson here, freelance writer, player of games, writer of boards, recorder videos, and tabletop role-playing aficionado. Welcome to another DM's Guild review, my written and video view series. We'll take a look at the adventures and supplemental material at the Dungeon Masters Guild website. With this video, we'll be reviewing the Adventure Bundles, Spelljammer Light of Xaryxis Adventure Bundle, designed by Kahn, Dana Floberg, and Charlie Branson for Dungeons & Dragons 5th edition. This review has been sponsored by the publisher, and a review copy has been provided for the purposes of this review. If you are interested in a sponsored review, please reach out via email, Twitter, or Discord, or my submission form at roguewatson.com. And if you enjoy the content, consider using my affiliate links for online shopping and supporting me via patreon.com/roguewatson. I previously reviewed the Spelljammer 5e published campaign Light of Xaryxis via my Roll20 reviews. You can definitely check that out here on the channel. I would probably recommend doing that before going through this video review because if you're unfamiliar with the way that Kahn's adventure systems work, is they literally look at the published campaigns, look at different like gaps or areas that are maybe underdeveloped, or perhaps are just, this area is not covered in the context of this adventure, and then designs basically side quests or layers or little dungeon crawls or events to fill in those gaps. And I previously mainly reviewed the products he did for Wild Beyond the Witchlight, which was actually, I believe, 3 adventure bundles divided into the 3 different areas of that campaign. And I was very, very positive about that entire experience and the way that he expertly was able to craft and fill all these various gaps and really create some awesome content, which is very heartwarming for me because that's really what I like to do in my campaigns. Those of you that watch my live stream campaigns know that I prefer to run the pre-published 5e adventures, especially because they're already rolled up on Roll20 with tokens and map art and everything, and then I can go in and kind of fix things and change the story how I want it to change and add some new content, which is pretty much exactly what this designer does. So in this case, these are 3 adventures that you can purchase separately on the DM's Guild, or you can purchase them as part of the bundle, which is the Spelljammer Light of Xaryxis Adventure Bundle. For the purposes of this review, I will be reviewing all 3 of these, but you can, of course, use that takeaway to pick and choose if you would like, or get the bundle. I believe it includes a discount if you get the entire bundle. Now, these are designed specifically for the Light of Xaryxis campaign, which again was the included adventure with the Spelljammer release for 5e. It's a shorter adventure. I was actually very positive on it. I know that the Spelljammer release got a lot of kind of pushback from people. It was a big meme at one point with Spelljammer confirmed, everybody wanting this setting. And I feel like Wizards maybe didn't quite give it the love and attention that it probably could have received compared to a lot of other different settings and releases that they've done. And instead, we just got kind of a shorter, almost Fandelver-sized mission, but it was for Tier 2 instead of Tier 1, which is kind of nice. However, I was still very positive about that adventure. It was very pulpy. It was very exciting in a lot of cool ways. So I did enjoy that adventure, but there were some certain areas that I was excited to see what this designer, one of my favorite designers, Kahn, could come up with for filling out some of these gaps. So the first one we're going to start with is saving Commodore Crux. Commodore Crux, hopefully you're very familiar with this character because they are one of the main NPCs in Light of Xaryxis, which that campaign does throw a bunch of NPCs at you. Like every single, I say chapter, but it's like it has like four or 5 parts, and each part is divided into a chapter. It's kind of organized a little differently. But you feel like you get like an NPC for every one of those different areas you go to. You start picking up this huge crew, so by the time you're done, you're just like got your Mass Effect 2 style party of just complete badasses and weirdos that can join you. And Crux is kind of the first one that joins you. The actually very first one, the captain of the first Spelljammer ship. She just basically takes you to the Rock of Brawl, which is the big asteroid city, kind of your hub adventure town for Spelljammer campaigns. And then she just drops you off and tells you, hey, go find this person, which is actually not the plasmoid here, it's the Griff. And then he'll take you on the rest of the adventure, essentially, to go save your planet. In the context of the original adventure, you just go to the nearest bar, which is run by a beholder, which is awesome. And then you just meet this Commodore Crux, who's very happy to join your crew. And then there's a little bit of a complication when you go back to the ship, and he's been renting it out to a smuggler, and there's kind of a little social scene, maybe some combat. But otherwise, there's not a big deal in terms of acquiring him. And then you basically just leave the Rock of Brawl. There's nothing else to do in that whole asteroid city, which is a bit of a bummer because it seems like a neat place. So I apologize, I have to give a lot of context for how these fit into the Pacific campaign. Saving Commodore Crux basically says, okay, well, what if he's not in the bar? Instead, he has actually been captured by this gang of plasmoids called the Amoebros, which is fucking great. And you have to get him back because him and his so apparently the scoundrel, now they work together, but she maybe had some more illicit dealings going on with this gang. He discovered that they were trying to smuggle some contraband, some chemicals used for mutations on animals, and he dumped the cargo. He got in trouble for it and got captured. All very Jabba the Hutt, Han Solo stuff. And now he's been captured, but the scoundrel Feladra is now back at the ship, and she's very upset about this circumstance. So the players can basically meet up with her, and now she's like, hey, can you go save him? And it ends up being a fun little dungeon crawl, basically, as you go through the hidden headquarters of the Amoebros beneath the Rock of Brawl. I really like the way this dungeon is set up. There's like a guard that's kind of dopey, and you can easily dupe him. There's a nice little meeting room. There's a laboratory where you can meet the halfling mage who's experimenting on animals. There's you can meet the gang leader whose name is Ripples, which I think is supposed to be this maybe fedora wearing dude back here, or maybe that's supposed to be the Frictionless Dan character. I'm not sure. I think that's Ripples because that's right. He's got the eels around him. So that is the boss of this one. And you can meet his grandmother, who's very kindly but also very loyal to the crew, which I think is a really fun role playing scene. So not hostile, but she will definitely like call down the alarms and stuff, and it's just a really fun situation. And then the actual boss fight. You go to the prison, and of course he's been taken over to a very exciting moment where he's like being kind of strung up, like where this waterfall is, and there's these eels that are ready to eat him, and the boss is basically trying to get some answers out of him or make an example of him, and it's all a very cool scenario. So for a dungeon crawl, which by the way is designed for 6th level, because it happens near the beginning of this campaign, but again that campaign is tier 2. It doesn't start to level 5, so they make it to level 6 when they make it to the Rock of Brawl. Really, really fun dungeon adds, which this campaign does not have very many dungeon crawls, like very traditional dungeon crawls. It does not have that at all. It's very much like on your ship doing ship stuff. So I really appreciate that, and I think it's a great timing for it in the campaign, and it offers a chance to stay at the Rock of Brawl and have a little fun doing stuff. And I really love a lot about it. My only complaint isn't what it does, but it's that at some point at the beginning, it says the purpose of this adventure is to give the party more opportunities to interact with the Rock of Brawl and its inhabitants, as well as to build significant relationships with Crux and his crew. The latter part is correct. I think it does a great job of making more meaningful connections with Crux, because you're actually saving him, which will help indebt him, make him more on board with your plan. You get to meet Feladra and interact with her more, the Treant that is the ship. All those characters really come into light while introducing these fun Amoebro villains, which is just a plasmoid gang is awesome. However, I don't think it does the first thing, which is to give the party more opportunities to interact with the Rock of Brawl. Pretty much the only thing you're doing is, I guess you get to meet the Frictionless Dan character, which I believe is literally the designer kind of injecting himself as a character, which is cute. And just at somewhere in the town, maybe in an alleyway or something, like I think it's the back of the alley at the Happy Beholder, and then you go immediately to the grotto. So there's really no like big investigation sequence. You don't go to like place to place. There's no excuse to really explore the town, which the purpose of a lot of these is very small. It's typically one dungeon. You're there doing your thing. So I didn't necessarily expect that, but it would have been really nice to have a few more steps, maybe before we go into the dungeon, where you had to go around and do some investigation and actually learn the location to give the players an excuse to kind of explore the Rock of Brawl just a little bit more. It would have expanded the scope of, I think, what this adventure wanted to do, which was to keep things pretty short and tight as a side quest. But in terms of being able to see more of the actual Rock of Brawl city, I guess, I would have really liked to see that. But other than that, I think this is a really, really fantastic adventure that adds a very fun-looking dungeon crawl and adds those meaningful connections that we're looking for whenever we expand these adventures. So that's the first one, Saving Commodore Crux. Very positive on that one. The second one is of Mercans and Megapedes. This one is designed for 7th level, and this takes place during, actually much later in the campaign, where the players show up in Vocath, which is a classic kind of Jabba the Hutt type character, although I guess Jabba's not the right, somebody they can actually eventually ally with, but they need their help from, so maybe more of a Lando Calrissian character. Anyway, and he's a like kind of a crime lord, arms dealer, and of course you meet him, and he's got this whole gladiatorial arena, and it's a very classic sci-fi trope. Where in order to kind of get with him and get his trust and his alliance and everything, you need to battle in his gladiatorial arena and fight a bunch of monsters, which I believe includes a megapede. This one wasn't necessarily, unlike the first one we just looked at, wasn't one that I thought needed to be expanded on. I thought the arena thing already worked well. It was a fun moment, very. And it felt very like that classic trope that is fun to explore with, where it's the episode 2 where the characters are tied up and captured and they have to fight big monsters randomly because it's just fun to show off these big monster critters. So instead, this one says, well, maybe instead of doing that, or in addition to, which is interesting, it says you could do that afterwards as maybe if they don't do this one well enough, they're sent on a mission from Vokath in order to try to gain his trust, to go to this kind of basically he gets his megapedes from a illicit supply depot located in a small asteroid, and you have to go there and figure out why the shipment is late. And now I'm thinking, okay, cool, we're gonna do LV-426, right? We're gonna show up and this place has been all nastified and it's taken over by monsters and it's gonna be all creepy cool. And that is kind of true, but it's also kind of disappointingly short for what it does. I do still love the map art, is absolutely lovely. In fact, I believe the same artist does all 3 of these. Dungeon Art, Agustina Elizondo, which is gorgeous, gorgeous artwork. I love it. But it's very, very short. You go in and there's basically 3 encounters. It's only 5 rooms, but still really cool. Again, that one is a huge boss arena. As you get a secret entrance to go inside. There's a funny meeting with an eyemonger, which is kind of a beholder asteroid thing that's semi-intelligent but kind of dumb, and there's a little battle with there, and then you can turn into like a social scene. That's kind of nice. Then you crawl through the maintenance shafts, also be very creepy, and I was just hoping more out of this one. Basically, it started off really interesting, and then it just kind of ends, or it gets to the boss battle like very, very quickly. I guess I was hoping for a longer dungeon crawl. I mean, the other one was 9 rooms long. This one is half that. You open a locker, there's some clockwork horrors inside. You're basically learning that these Thrycreen, it's a Thrycreen supply depot, breed these megapedes, and then they sell them to Vokath for use in his arena. Well, unfortunately, one of them just hatched early, and they spread around, and the megapedes just got too big and took over the place. It wasn't even really a big, like, it just seems like, didn't you guys have a contingency plan for this? Like, it wasn't that unusual that this even seemed to happen. One of them ended up being the dominant one and growing to full size and is now down here and has the eggs that you need. What I do like is this one has a very exciting boss battle setup and a cool boss arena where it's multi-leveled, which is unfortunately very hard to do in a top-down battle map, but I appreciate the attempt here. And your goal is to try to grab these eggs off the back of this creature while it's a giant, whatever it is, CR like 11 megapede, which is a pretty nasty boss fight for this level of players. This is level 7. So I think that's a very memorable moment and can lead to a lot of fun D&D hijinks, and there's some like tentacle grabber things the players can loot that the Thrycreen normally use to grab the eggs. So I like that there's kind of an extra objective to the boss fight. This one, out of all 3, probably works best as a standalone layer, just as a megapede layer that you could inject into any, Spelljammer campaign or anything that has megapedes in it, with a bit of a, it has sci-fi stuff going on. In terms of the story, though, I didn't think this one really needed anything extra from Vokath to do, and I already thought the arena worked just fine, so it felt like a weird one to expand. And then it says, interestingly, depending on how they do, like if they fail completely at recovering the eggs, then they have to do the arena battle completely as written. If they have a partial success, then maybe they can do like some of the arena battle, but they're already like on board with some of the faction stuff you have to do later. And then if they do a full success, you can probably just skip the entire arena battle thing, which again, I liked, and go straight to the faction thing where you're already looking pretty good. So I guess I appreciate the way that it has multiple conclusions that can appear depending on how well you're able to recover the eggs, because it's not just about defeating this monster. In fact, the monster can actually escape if you press the controls and open the big panel. It can roll up into a ball and just float out into space, and then you're kind of screwed. So interesting adventure for sure, but an area that I didn't think necessarily needed more meaningful connections, and I don't know how well that actually expands on Vokath stuff compared to what it does for Crux and the crew in the very first one. Then the third one is Mind Flayer Over Matter. And as soon as I saw this, I knew exactly where the designer was aiming at, not where they were going, but at least one of the things that is hilariously underdeveloped and underwritten is near the end of the campaign, which I believe we are level 8 at this point, you're arriving with your armada, having gotten all the alliance from Vokath, into the Astral Elves, whatever their doom space, I guess, area, kind of with your final approach into the final big space battle. And this Githyanki shows up running on a dragon, and it's they do this thing in Light of Xaryxis where it's all like these exciting cliffhangers at the end of everything, which is cool. It's very pulpy. It's very, oh, we're just getting yanked from one, exciting crisis to another. But in this one, and usually they're fine, and they do cool things, like a ship approaches, and it becomes either a bad ship or it's a good ship. You just don't know. This one, it's like, oh, this Githyanki approaches on a dragon. What's going to happen? And literally, basically, she just waves and says, "What's up, fellow space fantasy kids?" And then, have you seen any mind flayers lately or something? Like, it's a weird, like, flyby. Like, there's nothing going on there. So this is a great, great, great one. Unlike the last one, this is a perfect opportunity to expand on what the hell is this Githyanki doing riding on this dragon. That's such a random thing. What we get is, weirdly, an equally random quest that feels like the climax of an entire campaign, if I'm being honest, which means it's very epic and cool. But I wonder if the players will get a bit of a whiplash because they're literally on their way to the climax of their campaign, and then this Githyanki shows up and says, "Hey, you want to go help me take out some mind flayers who are doing some real bad shit? And in return, by the way, I've got information that will help you, like, destroy this other supply, but do some kind of thing that will help you in your final mission." So it does have some incentive there. But what she has you do is you go to this completely other space area called the Vermilion Eye, and it's got this like nebula and this ring gate around it that mind flare. There's a cool little encounter first with a bunch of like parasitic creatures and all that. That's neat. But the main thing is you show up to this ring gate that's being operated by mind flayers, and they're literally opening a portal into the far realm, and they're all like chanting this. I mean, this feels like literally the climax of a campaign or a very long quest chain where like you finally come across this thing, and now you have to stop like horrible things from emerging from the portal. It's awesome, but it almost feels too big for what this is. But I do like the way this is really set up as a multi-stage like boss battle encounter. So even as you approach on your spaceship, there's a huge table of different complications that can happen from all the different surges of magic energy and far realm stuff and reality warping and people swapping and things happening. And then on each of these platforms, there's a different mind flare channeling energy. Each of these platforms has a different ongoing effect that happens. So there's all these different, various debuffs and environmental hazards that are happening from each mind flayer. But as the players take them out, those things then start stopping. And you can kind of systematically go to each of these crystal platforms and destroy that mind flayer, and then that will turn off a different ongoing effect. That's really, really cool. And then, of course, at the end, the players can choose to either take over the crystals or destroy the crystals and split up and try to, attune to them and do all these different things. No matter what, at the end, of course, a cosmic horror, which is a big CR-18 nasty tentacled creature. Hang on one second, sweetheart. A CR-18 tentacle creature will be bursting through this portal, and then you have to fight this battle and try to close it as you're definitely don't want to fight this creature in a stand-up battle. Very, very cool, very memorable, very epic. I just wonder if it all feels like, oh, this is all so sudden kind of a feeling as you've gotten this quest so late in your campaign. It just feels like this equally epic event that maybe is even more epic than the end of the Light of Xaryxis campaign. Because one of my primary complaints about that campaign is I loved like 80% of it, and the part I didn't love was basically the very, very end conclusion, pretty much after the Armada battle, when you end up on the home world and you have to do this one little bullshit battle that has kind of a Deus Ex Machina show up at the end, is very disappointing. Whereas this is probably an even better ending to the climax. So I wonder if somehow we could interweave this into the main campaign, because it is really, really cool, and I'm very impressed with it, with the caveat that it's almost too cool. But I like the way it's designed, and at the end of any kind of Mind Flayer campaign, this would be absolutely epic with this giant Stargate happening and tentacles coming out and all that good stuff. So honestly, all three of these adventures are very cool. They're very professionally designed. They've got the new magic items, and they've got some stat blocks all printed in here. The map art is incredible. Some of them I like more than others for sure. In fact, if I were to rank them, I think I would actually put Commodore Crux at the very beginning, because I think it does everything perfectly. It expands the existing NPCs. It has a perfect moment of, hey, here's a good time for a dungeon crawl. It's a really good dungeon crawl. It just does everything right, in my opinion. Next, I think would be Mind Flayover Matter, because I think this is a spot that needed to be expanded very heavily, and I do think what is given is extremely awesome. It's just maybe not quite as interesting, and it does do a good job with the Githyanki. Actually has a good personality, and she kind of sticks with you throughout the thing, and at the very end she of course go and engages like an entire Mind Flayer ship or something, so she's not over, destroying the balance of the encounter or anything, but she's there as kind of an emergency, like, oh shit, the player's about to die, we can have her kind of show up again, I guess. It's very epic and awesome. My only thing is it might just be a little too much given the context of the other main campaign that's going on, but still very, very positive. And then of mercans and megapedes is my least favorite. I still think it's a very solid megapede layer. It's just a little bit shorter than I was hoping for, and the area that it actually fills in and expands, I didn't think, unlike the other two, actually needed to be filled in or expanded. I think what was there was already fine, so I would have rather the designer maybe picked a different spot to and maybe a different NPC to choose and expand on and do something more with. I know there was one of the areas I was hoping for, I forget the name of the character, but you go to land on to save one of Crux's Griff allies kind of later in the campaign, and there's just a moment where it's almost a chase scene where he's like running away from these, like, I think they're alien-y, mushroomy people or something on a plane. I would have liked to see maybe that expanded a little bit further. Or there were some other areas in the campaign I think would have been more better served than this one. But even then, this is my least favorite, and it's still a very, very solid adventure. And interestingly, I think maybe serves the best single, like, drop-in side quest for a different, campaign that's still Spelljammer of the three. All right, let's go over my pros and cons for the entire Light of Xaryxis adventure bundle. Pro, they inject excellent side quests into the campaign. As I mentioned, that's kind of the whole point of this, is if these initial areas were just simple scenes or something, this actually gives you full-on side quests, especially when it comes to the first and third one. That's exactly what they do. These were not... these were just scenes with characters before, and now they've been expanded into entire side quests and entire dungeon crawls or epic, far realm gates opening up that you have to stop. In terms of the second one, it still injects a dungeon crawl into where there wasn't a dungeon crawl before, which is still pretty fun. I'm a fan of dungeon crawls. Pro, it expands meaningful interactions with existing NPCs, especially with saving Commodore Crux, but the existing NPCs exist in all three of these adventures to some extent. The second one does that the worst because Volcath is just there giving you the quest, but the other two, those NPCs are actually present during the context of the story, and in one of them you're saving them, and the other one you're going on the adventure basically with them. So it has those deeper connections, and Light of Xaryxis actually does a good job of throwing a lot of NPCs at you, so I appreciate that we get to expand on some of them. Pro, full color gridded and gridless maps for each location. Absolutely gorgeous map art, which is something I've come to expect from this designer, and one of many reasons why I really enjoy their work, because they do not skimp on giving me very awesome maps for those of us that use VTTs, and especially because a lot of these adventures are dungeon crawls, and if you're going to have dungeon crawls, you really want to have a good map to back it up. And pro, troubleshooting notes with combat adjustments. So unlike some adventures which have, those adjustments for every single encounter, instead, this designer basically just includes a final heading at the end of each adventure that's a troubleshooting area where it covers, hey, any problems the characters would have or any adjustments need to be made in combat. Like the megapede one's like, hey, a megapede's very hard. If we need to adjust the combat, here's how to do that. In this case, there's a sensitive topic with animal experimentation that you can try to, how best to deal with that with your players, or just how to deal with this final combat encounter. And in the case of troubleshooting for this final one is how to do if you have fewer players that can't attune to the crystals, and how do you deal with having this giant, CR18 creature coming through and all that good stuff. So I appreciate that that's there. And I think that's a good way of handling it too. We don't necessarily need the individual adjustments for every single encounter, but having something at the end that gives me some clue as to how to maybe fix things if things go awry, because it's D&D and things will definitely go awry. Cons, I have none, even though I do like some more than others, and I think the Megapede one is a little bit weaker than I was hoping, but I had complaints about all three of them, right? I wish Commodore Crux would have explored Rock of Brawl better, and I wish maybe the Mind Flayer one, I don't know what I would have wished on that one, actually. I like the end of that one, but it just feels like the climax of a longer quest, so I'm not sure what the adjustment fix would be for there. But none of those are very strong cons. Honestly, I think the whole thing is very, very positive, and even the weakest one, I think, is still an excellent, excellent adventure for a Spelljammer. campaign. Final verdict, all 3 Spelljammer adventures expand Light of Xaryxis in fun and meaningful ways, but can also be utilized as satisfying drop-in side quests and layers for any Spelljammer campaign. Thank you to everyone for watching this video review. You can see my written review at roguewatson.com. You can watch more reviews and videos and follow our own D&D adventures here on my YouTube channel, and you can support my work at patreon.com/roguewatson. Thank you.